What's up, guys? Nathan here. For the past couple of days, I've been playing the 3.3 flashback event. As expected, it's been a lot of fun, and I look forward to continuing to throw myself at maps until Monster Hunter World comes out. However, before that, I wanted to make another episode of Casual Guides for Casual Players of Path of Exile. But Path of Exile guides, they're pretty good. Check them out. Thanks. This time, I'll be focusing on my league starter, the totally ethical, pure physical, On's Might Lacerate Gladiator. The gist of the build is to provide solid damage, solid defenses, and a fast playstyle on an insanely low budget. We utilize the Bringer of Rain helmet to achieve a cheap pseudo 7 link, then supplement it with dual On's Mights and a Tomb Fist, which ultimately results in very respectable DPS for next to no investment. So let's get started with the pros and cons. The pros are as follows. Stupidly cheap, even by most budget build standards. Very tanky, with multiple layers of defense, including blind, block, endurance charges, and high armor. Purely physical, so you don't have to worry about boss resistances at all. Reasonably fast mapping with fast leap slams and fun bleed explosions. Doesn't require Uberlab. Here are the cons. It's not the highest damage in the world. Requires a lot of levels to really come online. Doesn't handle degen or elemental damage exceptionally well. As you might guess, the playstyle of this build is pretty standard as far as most melee characters go. You leap slam around to keep Fortify up, and use Lacerate to explode packs as you go. For bosses, you drop your War Chief, unleash your Vol Double Strikers, pop all your flasks, and watch everything melt. The build is extremely easy and straightforward to play, and as such is a great beginner option for anyone looking to get into the game. Once you get some decent rares and start to fill in all the life nodes on your tree, the build gets to be surprisingly tanky thanks to its multiple layers of defense. In case you didn't know, defensive layers in Path of Exile refers to the concept of mitigating the damage you take with more than just one form of defense. Typically, a good build will use at least 2 defensive layers. For example, a Trapper might use Mind over Matter and Acrobatics. This build, on the other hand, pushes this to the absolute limit with 6 solid defensive layers. You have Armor, Blind, Endurance Charges, flat physical damage reduction from your Ascendancy, 6,000 life, and a decent block chance. Because of this, you're extremely resistant to physical damage, leaving only spells for you to worry about dodging. The damage of this build really kicks in at level 68 when you can equip 2 On's Mights. This will immediately cap your accuracy, grant a ton of free crit multi, and allow you to permanently gain 10% more physical damage thanks to Outmatch and Outlast. To further scale your damage, you'll want to focus on getting as much crit multi, and flat physical damage on your jewelry as possible. A small investment should net you around 300k Shaper DPS purely from Lacerate, and a little more can easily push you over 1 million DPS with all your Flasks, War Chief, and Vol Double Strikers going at it. That being said, I wouldn't recommend taking on endgame bosses like Uber Elder with this build. Lacerate is still a name-lock melee skill with average range when used with concentrated effect, so there are definitely better options out there when it comes to taking out the game's absolute hardest content. I personally played it as a fun, comfortable mapper, so I think that's its best application. Next up, let's take a look at the recommended gem links for the build. Your main damage setup goes in your helm. It consists of Lacerate, Brutality, Maim, and Concentrated Effect or Increased Area Effect depending on what you're doing. I'm actually using Multi-Strike rather than Concentrated Effect in the footage you're watching, but it's less DPS and you really don't need that much attack speed. I just like the feel of it. Your mobility setup is faster attacks, blood magic, and leap slam. You could also 4-link this with Fortify, but you'd then have to relegate Vol Double Strike to just a 3-link, and I prefer to have more DPS there. Your aura setup is Vol Haste, Vulnerability, and Blasphemy. These auras are totally flexible. If you want to give up some DPS, you could run Arctic Armor or Determination instead and become basically immune to physical damage. I just prefer more DPS. The next setup is your War Chief. I like to just link Ancestral War Chief and Fortify together so it's less likely to die, then put a Blood Rage in there for the massive leech and attack speed buff. Lastly, we have your most important secondary DPS source, Vol Double Strike. The links here are Vol Double Strike, Brutality, Bloodlust, and Melee Physical Damage. Just make sure your target is bleeding before you release these bad boys. Now onto the juicy bit, the required and recommended gears. Keep in mind, this is, in my opinion, what makes the build really shine. While plenty of similar builds out there will have better survivability or more damage, most of them are far more expensive. Additionally, I'll be organizing the section by just how necessary each item is so you know how best to prioritize your spending. Required. This build only absolutely requires 4 uniques: the Bringer of Rain helmet, 2 On's Might swords, and a Pacifism corrupted jewel. As mentioned before, they account for the gross majority of your damage by abusing negative frenzy charge mechanics and providing a free 7 link. Highly recommended. Tomb Fist gloves, Lion's Roar, a diamond flask, and a silver flask. Tomb Fist provides you with a free Intimidate that's a staple of pretty much all attack-based builds these days, and the flasks all provide significant DPS boosts. Lion's Roar also provides a nice armor increase and some knockback, so it can easily be used defensively if you're being overwhelmed by mobs. Recommended for min-maxing. Rare jewelry with flat physical damage, critical strike chance, and critical strike multiplier. Because we're tight on jewel sockets and our weapons can't be upgraded, there aren't a ton of ways to scale our damage super high. The best way to help with this is expensive crit jewelry. You can really go crazy here, so if you have some leftover currency, get the best amulet and diamond rings that you can afford. Filling in the blanks. Once you've purchased all your necessary gear, you should have plenty of leftover slots to fill. Boots, a belt, and probably a ring or two. Use these slots to get as much life as possible, cap your resists, and grab some extra int to make your blasphemy setup work. Again, the sky's the limit here, so if you can afford to overcap your resists and get 100 plus life on every rare piece of gear, go for it. And that about sums up the build guide. In short, this Lacerate Gladiator is an excellent option for new Path of Exile players and veterans alike, and functions best if you want to just get into mapping on as little currency as possible. If you have any questions about this build or anything else Path of Exile related, feel free to leave me a comment below. This has been Nathan, thanks for watching, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.
Thank you!
Special thanks to Real Human for being my only Patreon supporter. You know, hopefully this page will have a few more people and this segment won't feel so long and like I'm having to try to fill space or anything because I'll be able to say a lot of names. It'll be really fun. I'll get to test how fast I can bust rhymes, know what I mean? So thanks Real Human. Go subscribe to me on Patreon. Thanks guys.